We had a previous episode on self publishing your book as a business owner, and that's episode 95. And today, with today's guest, I want to go deeper into the topic. Today's guest is Rodney Miles, and for 15 years now, he has been consulting with business owners on self publishing their books. And we all know that books are a great way to build your influence, build your authority, show that you are an authority on a topic, and also to market your business. I've heard someone call books a sort of business card you can hand out too that increases your status for whoever is getting it. So today we'll talk with Rodney Miles. We'll talk about self-publishing on a different level than we've talked about on episode 95. And before I go talk through this whole episode, welcome to the show, Rodney.
Thank you so much. Been excited to meet you. This is very cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So 15 years, what inspired you to start helping people publish, self-publish books?
Probably the real estate market crash.
Oh.
And some curses are a blessing, right?
Yeah.
No, I always, my whole life, love books, and talk about it a lot, how it's been such a critical facet of life for me. Even to this day, it hasn't changed. I learned as a little kid that if there was something I wanted to find out, it was probably in a book somewhere. And even today, if there's a subject I want to learn about, my usual MO is I'll go get maybe 6, 7 books on the subject from the library, look them over, find 2 or 3 that stand out, and settle on one, and read 1 or 2 of them. So really, any answers you need. Books are very unique, actually, and I had to play with this idea not too long ago. I guess when writing the first in my series, The Modern Author, are books here to stay? Print books, in particular, because of technology, because of advances in technology and the ebook. And I also realized my 15 years doing this. But to answer your question, how did I went other routes. I went self-employment, entrepreneurism, my own businesses. And just because I had the idea, because surely no one can make a living as an artist or a writer. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's really not, though. And it took me, I guess, 40 years to come to a point where I had to make a choice. At 40, I could go back into real estate as one of the people who truly love the industry. And I really did. It wasn't that I didn't like real estate. I did. But I always had this underlying passion. And this is clearly where I should be now. And it was an opportunity to reinvent myself at 40. I actually went back to college for a year, started writing for a penny a word. And 15 years later, have helped. It's got to be over 300 books, 300 projects where somebody got a book out, and whether it was a memoir or a business book. So I'm sorry, I touched on a few things there. I'm kind of all over the place. But in terms of, just to wrap up the other thought, in terms of, will books survive? I'm convinced print books will always survive. In an old book, actually, I just saw a new take on this, on a book called Megatrends. When I was a kid, there was a book called Megatrends by John Nesbitt. And he had 6, 7, a dozen global trends. It's very interesting, probably very interesting if anybody's curious, even to read that book now, as grossly outdated as it might seem. It's a stepping stone in technology history, because he's talking in that book, and this is in the 70s, I think. He's talking in that book about these global trends. And one of them is the satellite.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we would compare that maybe to the internet or smartphones. I mean, we're so past the satellite. But at the time, it was revolutionary because it connected Japan and America and Texas and Sarajevo. The world became smaller because of the satellite. Anyway, one of the concepts in that book is principle he calls high tech, high touch, which your audience may or may not be familiar with. But the idea is every advance in technology, because we're human, has to be accompanied in some way by touch,
Mm.
by the human involvement. Now, in Megatrends, he's making a case for why shopping malls won't go away. Because way back then in the 70s, the question was, would people even go to malls anymore? You know, the indoor mall was the thing back then. Um, and he argued yes, because if for nothing else, we'll go just to be around other human beings
Mm.
and have that human experience, because we need it. We need a balance with with technology, and when one gets out of balance, it's not good. That's part of why I think print books will survive. Um, since this is a show on technology, I think that's an interesting principle. And a good example of how that might get lost with technology is when you call a service provider or a business, and you get an AI answering the phone, and
Yeah.
it's 30 minutes before you talk to a human being. Now I sound like a 55-year-old dude, but it's true enough. Imagine, when you call and a human being answers the phone, um, it's kind of valuable. So uh, interesting, and that's part of why print books will survive and different formats will survive. And that's the first thing I think of when we talk about technology and books, is how it's splintered into many forms. Uh, Book. So how you define book has changed. How we define read and reading has changed. How we define writing has changed. All these definitions have changed, and that's one of the major thrusts of my first book on self-publishing, The Modern Author, is understanding how these definitions have changed over the last 15, especially 20 years.
Mm. Okay, so now I think going from your point, if books would survive, I don't know, because these days my books have turned into I've not read these ones. I bought them like 4 years
I,
ago. I have some in my bedroom I used to make them floating shelves. But actually, one of my goals this year, I'm very like I'm a very techie person, but I'm a technophobe at the same time, so you would never catch me with something like Alexa in my house ever. But I can tell you everything
mm,
about it. Yeah,
yeah.
stuff like that. So, I think for the issue of books, one of my goals this year is reading more books. And why is that? Because I've tried a lot to read the ebooks, the and co, the Kindle, the whatever, but it's different. There's a really big difference. You have you try to read an ebook on your phone, you have notifications. The Kindle, it has its own set of issues, and holding a book, holding a physical book, it's different. It's different, and you know that it's more, how do I put it? It's more real. It feels more real to me because maybe the Kindle crashes, or your phone crashes, or something happens to whatever cloud they save those books and they're all gone. But that's why I still buy physical books. I know I'll go back to reading them someday. I don't know about the next generation who didn't grow up on them, so that's the thing. So I think one question I'll ask is, a lot of people write books for the reasons I mentioned at the beginning, just maybe to build authority and cool. Then there are other people who want their books to actually sell, want their books to be a source of living to them. So they want their books to be maybe bestsellers. So now, the term bestseller, especially now we are dealing with technology and co, we are no longer shipping books in containers and co. What does the term bestseller mean today? How has it changed?
That's such a great question, and it's so important because when I was a young man, bestseller meant, and in many people's minds, and this is what I call the ignorance gap.
Yeah.
That gets taken advantage of, because you've got one idea and there's another idea that applies, and that gap can be a little dangerous. So, yeah, when growing up, and even to this day, the idea of bestseller carries with it You know, you've got this book. Some publisher has swept you off your feet and courted you and given you a big fat advance,
Yeah.
pile of cash, put you on a plane, and you're in Hawaii in some upper suite, uh, going around signing books and doing a tour. Um, People are gathered around, hoping you'll sign a book, and you've got millions of dollars coming in, and blah 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 blah. That's I actually, when I tell that little scene, I kind of picture the ex-wife in Throw Mama from the Train, where the Billy Crystal, the aspiring writer, can't write. Yeah, he's got writer's block, and his ex-wife, who has half the mind he does, and just writes some romancy type thing, and becomes a big success with it, and is touring all over the place. And that champagne style bestseller, right?
Yeah.
So, but at its most basic, everybody sort of thinks a bestseller means it's best selling. It's selling a lot of copies. I'll tell you what happened to that about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when Amazon came and disrupted the whole publishing industry. And for whatever it's worth, a little context, I'm love hate. Uh, I think Amazon has created opportunities. I wouldn't do what I do if it wasn't for Amazon. At the same time, there are some really horrible things that have happened through this, whether they're permanent or temporary, like brick and mortar bookshops closing en masse.
Yeah.
For a while, everything to compete was getting more centralized. So you had more mega bookstores. I do think that's changing now. It's very exciting, actually, some of the things that we're kind of coming through that whole cycle with. But so what happened, to get back to how Amazon disrupted this? See, the New York Times back then, which was and still is the shining city on the hill as far as bestsellers. To be a New York Times bestseller is still the most coveted thing.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, they would consider maybe 25 genres or 25 categories of books, and believe they only considered hardcover books.
Mm.
This is back in traditional publishing days before self-publishing, and we had different formats like paperback. A publisher would only put out a paperback after about a year of
Oh.
selling the hardcover. It was a lower price point. They wanted to make more. They make more money on the hardbacks, and it was. It's still that way, but now it's a fraction of the industry. So anyway, Amazon comes along, and instead of 25 categories, they have 100 or 200 categories. Now today, there's hundreds of categories and subcategories on Amazon. To be a bestseller on Amazon, you need to be in the top 100 titles in any category.
Mm.
So now, instead of 25 bestsellers, just for theoretical example, you got literally hundreds of them. So that waters it down a little, maybe justifiably so, because you're in different niche categories, right?
Hmm.
But the thing that was bad about it over the last 15 years is there was a period where it's not so much this way now, but there was a period I can remember, certainly 15, 10 years ago, where what all you had to do to become an Amazon bestseller, here's a little dirty secret of self-publishing, is launch into a category where there were fewer than 100 books.
Oh. Oh.
You'd be in the top 100, and it would show up. You'd be there. It is. It's a bestseller, and literally sells 0 copies. So there was what I call the swarm, a group. And it's a little derogatory. Particular group of entrepreneurs who simply go from the path of least resistance as that changes over time. Like when I was a real estate agent, they used to joke, if you got pulled over in Florida, the cop would say, "Let me see your license, registration, and your real estate license,"
Yeah.
because everybody had a real estate license. Well, it got worse when I was in, because the market was going up 20% a year, and uh, your landscaper, beautician, attorneys, they all dropped what they were doing and got into real estate because it was easy money. So it was like that in publishing for a little while. There were gurus who would promise that they'd make you a best-selling author, and that's what they would do. They would simply launch you into a sometimes non-relevant category, uh, and make your book live, and it didn't matter if it sold any copies. Yet the client would then say, "I'm a best-selling author," and they've sold like 5 books.
Yeah.
For a bibliophile like me, that was sacrilege, you know. Uh, so today, the meaning of bestseller it's like you look up a definition, it's got 5 definitions, right? Uh, it takes a basic understanding of the bestseller lists, which is sort of easy. The New York Times is very selective and actually also very subjective. It's not completely based on, they're not completely based purely on sales numbers, which is the first thing to understand.
Hmm.
But generally, to hit one of those lists, I call this national bestsellers, which would include USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and New York Times. You need to sell generally between 3 and 10,000 copies of your book within a 1 week period. That's the basic, most basic description. To be an Amazon bestseller has different definitions because they have different bestseller lists. But to be what I call a niche or a category bestseller, you can generally accomplish that in a subcategory with uh, 10 to 20 sales on a given day, and it's a little more legitimate now. I mean, I think the public is going to, over time, the public comes to understand, hey, bestseller doesn't quite mean what it used to mean, and people will start to differentiate. So when you see a book cover and it says New York Times bestseller, that should carry more weight than just a niche bestseller.
Hmm.
But the other thing is, it kind of doesn't matter like it used to. If I'm looking for a book on sales funnels, I don't necessarily care if it's a New York Times bestseller. What I do care about is, does it solve my problem, and is it put together professionally, and is it more than a business card, and is there some social proof that suggests this is going to help me because it's helped other people uh, solve what I'm trying to solve. So it's kind of complex. It's 3 dimensional now. Uh, Certainly, there are folks who need a bestseller on their book launch to complement a resume, and I totally get that. In fact, I do it. I don't do it as a standalone service, making a book a bestseller, but I do have particular launch strategies that I feel are ethical and relevant. So I'm not going to put your book, if your book is on networking. I'm not going to put it in graphic design just because it's a soft category where you're
Yeah.
likely to be in the top 100. That's a disservice. That's actually a more of a disservice to the book than it might even sound like. So you want to keep it relevant. There's great software by the Kindlepreneur guy. It's called Publisher Rocket, where you can research categories and find relevant categories where you've got the best shot at being in the top 10 books on launch day. Uh, I do think that's not only okay, I think it's a good strategy. So sorry, I'm long winded today,
Okay, so I
but
think
I'm adamant about that subject.
yeah. So now, I think okay. So if you look at a book, especially for a business, how would you say you would measure a business book's success beyond just the sales numbers?
Sure. Particularly the social proof is probably the first way. The first thing we all do, whether we are fully aware of it or not, when we see a book, is we make a judgment as to how well it's put together, how professionally it's put together. That's not your only criteria. Certainly, you don't open up Amazon or walk into Barnes and Noble thinking, I'm going to look for the most professionally put together book. but it's almost subconscious, where if there are these red flags, uh, it might dissuade you, or discourage you
Yeah.
from picking up a book. So it's kind of the first barrier you get through when you're putting your book together. You want it to meet certain criteria that the potential reader might not even be aware of, but they make a judgment on nonetheless. So if it doesn't look professional, that's the first thing. And tell you the truth, business books. It's interesting you ask me that, because over the last year and a half, 2 years, it's kind of ironic because I started off 15 years ago almost purely with what I call books of expertise.
Mm.
It's a very ready market for self-publishing because it's not just a hobby, it's an investment in your business and your career, and therefore paying for assistance with a book makes more financial sense anyway immediately. So, but in the last couple of years, I really think I've gotten to help with some of the not and I mean this, not just the best business books that I've worked with, but some of the best business books that I'm aware of. There's one coming out by author Nick Bradley, who I don't think he would mind me saying this. It's called Exit for Millions, and it's about the business practices of private equity and how he took switched his role from being the negotiator on the private equity side of the table to helping the business owner negotiate the sale of a business. But
Mm.
getting from here to there include all these business strategies, types of business growth, uh, business concepts that I haven't seen anywhere else. And I'm not the most well read on business, but I'm a fan and have read many of the staples. So to answer your question, in working with Nick, for example, and some of these other books, some other titles shake out. And where I thought I was fairly well read in the genre of business, other books and authors that I hadn't heard of
Mm.
started shaking out. There's something to that. I guess the answer to your question would be primarily word of mouth.
Mm.
Uh, and sometimes the trend, like when I read Start With Why by Simon Sinek, that
Yeah.
was trending. Now it's a staple, it's a classic. There are authors you can find like Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, Built to Last. These are classics in the genre. Um, and I did start, as a weird little kid, I read Iacocca in the 70s and 80s. I read Art of the Deal,
Oh.
and then moving forward as I need. And here it goes back to the other thing we were talking about. It doesn't necessarily need to be a big bestseller. When I was in real estate brokerage, I found a book by a fellow named Tish, who wrote about different kinds of real estate brokerages. It's a brilliant little book. Certainly not a bestseller because it's so niche. So I guess you find them by word of mouth, and part of the joy is digging. If you have a question, there's an answer in more than a. If you want more than a blog article answer, um, um, it's generally in a book. Books are fabulous for this, and if you dig, uh, which is part of the fun, you can find books that'll address exactly what you're looking for in ways that surprise you, actually.
Mm. Okay. So now, looking at technology, um, book authors when they write the books, they I think they probably have to use a couple of especially with the way the environment is these days, you can't avoid tech. So what tech tools, what systems or whatever do
Mm.
successful authors use to promote their books, and what is the minimum tech they would need to launch a successful book?
Sure. Uh, Great question. And what's interesting is I start with, so you asked about the book production and book marketing
Yeah.
using technology.
Yeah.
Um, on the production side, it was very interesting. When I got involved 15 years ago, the standard in the publishing industry was Adobe InDesign.
Hmm.
And I think I was too broke to afford it, or I didn't want to go through the learning curve necessarily. But I really felt like if I'm going to do this, this is what I'm going to have to learn. I frankly have never really had to, because I realized back then, most, if not all of my clients, none of them use InDesign. So not that they needed to, but I found that everyone seemed to use Word.
Yeah.
Microsoft Word was just everywhere. The Microsoft Word is a word processing program that's been around forever. Almost everybody has it, even if you have a Mac. And that's actually primarily what I use, is Word for Mac. It's got more power, more options and tools than I'll ever use. And I've used Word. I was very happy to settle on Word. I'm a minimalist, tech minimalist. I definitely embrace something if it helps, but I'm no longer. You get past 40, I guess, and you decide if there's not cost benefit analysis to the learning curve,
Yeah.
then why bother? Uh, but Word and I even use a graphics program called GIMP for designing book covers. So between those two programs, Word and GIMP, uh, and the paid alternative to GIMP would be, of course, Photoshop
Photoshop, yeah.
or Illustrator. Yep. I have those. I use them as well, but I just early on started using Word and GIMP, and they've served me for 15 years. But I can use the other platforms, the other uh, softwares, and I know there are AI tools today. There's also, like, if you go to Pixabay for images, there's an option where you can exclude AI created images. When you upload a book to Kindle Direct Publishing, there is a question that asks, was AI used in the preparation of this book in any way? And I'm not 100% sure. I've got my theories as to why they ask that. I think it's probably mostly just for their internal analysis. I don't think they're going to exclude or disclose,
Yeah.
but they might. They might. I'm not sure where they're going or why they want that data. I just think it's interesting to watch things Kindle does. So that said, if you're an author and you're creating a book, I think Word or Pages, any word processor, of course, is helpful or necessary. Um, and when I know when it comes to Word, it's got all the design tools you could want. I've done children's books in Word. It's
Hmm.
got so much power to it that you can really do anything you want. If you want to go past that in terms of efficiency, there's a program. There are novel writing software programs. The Probably the most prominent is called Scrivener, and Scrivener. So I found some of the features that I use in a certain way in Word, like the navigation pane and headers and style settings, so you can move around and organize a document, are tenfold in something like Scrivener, where you can organize, and it goes even beyond that. So Word is a word processing program. Scrivener is a novel writing program where you can organize research, character studies. You can move whole chunks of text around just with click and drag in the navigation bar. And I've seen other authors say, prominent authors, that when they started using Scrivener, their novel writing productivity went up by a factor of 10. Boom.
Wow.
So that's powerful. In terms of marketing, the first thing that comes to mind is I'm in a little team right now where another member of the team makes AI videos, AI
Hmm.
shorts. And I was, kind of interested in it, not interested in doing it, but she's creating these shorts, and they're actually pretty cool with a narration, with a subject matter. She's very competent with putting them together. Just has little tiny points of connection to put out there so that lead people back to his website and so on. That seems to be effective. And then in terms of marketing, you combine the technology with the purpose, which is marketing, and you combine that with books and promotion. You get innovative platforms and innovative ideas. Uh, for example, I suppose it's a technological thing of interest. There is a platform where you can go to get more book reviews. And I say this carefully because Amazon has terms of service you don't want to violate. And one
Mm.
of those terms is you can't do a review exchange. So
Oh.
if they find out I reviewed your book and you reviewed my book, they'll remove the reviews, right? So there is a platform that saw that and they've used technology to create a platform where we've got hundreds of people doing this, and they just make sure that if I reviewed your book, I will never even have the chance for you to review my book. So we therefore avoid being a review exchange.
Mm.
So there's things like that. Of course, there's promotion sites where they take a survey of what books you like to read, and every day send you a list of deals on books like that. I mean, you can hone in so specifically thanks to the technology today that it's made it it's made it really interesting, and it's a good thing. Facebook is known for being able to drill down demographically into who you want to reach, and I compare that to 30 years ago where your option was a classified ad in a print newspaper. You got 3 lines.
Yeah.
It's changed quite a bit.
Amazing. So now for a business owner who wants to write, self-publish a book, especially in this day and age, what's one piece of advice you would give to them so they can get the maximum impact from that book?
Well, the first thing that leapt to mind, other than what I call the basics, and the basics is what we talked about, being done professionally, looking professional, and so on, is there was a stat on it. It changes, but not everybody reads your whole book. So it was customary to put a call to action in the back of the book, and it's actually very good to put a call of action, or maybe even two, in the front of the book.
Hmm.
And it can be done in such a way that it's not obnoxious. It's not too salesy. But the thing about it that is when you look at a book on Amazon or any online platform, will generally let a reader preview uh, generally 10% of the book. So a 200-page book, they'll actually let you see the first 20 pages, for example. So if you can put a call to action, especially something compelling, um, one that Chandler Bolt does in the beginning of his book, Published, is offer, and so does Alex Hormozy. Right at the beginning of the book, is offer the a free audiobook version.
Hmm.
If you go to the website with a simple web address, so if you're considering the book, you might see the preview, the first few pages, see that and go, oh, I'd rather the audiobook anyway, and you might not even buy the book there on whatever platform you're on. You might just go to the website and give your email address and sign up, but get the free audiobook. So that front matter is very important for that reason, especially if your purpose is to drive your business, to get traffic flowing through your funnels. Your book can be part of that funnel, but what's kind of amazing is you don't even need the book to sell or be read in many cases. You
Yeah.
just need it to connect with somebody. And if you have something compelling in the beginning, that's I would that's a probably not a bad little tip to start with, because it's not done as often as it probably could be, and it can be done poorly too if it's over the top or something. But it's a good little tip.
Mm, amazing. So now, for listeners, for watchers who have listened to this episode, they're inspired to write their books. They've gotten a couple of tips on succeeding with writing a book. And maybe they want to continue this conversation. They want to learn more from you. They want to connect with you or probably work with you. What's the best way they can reach you?
Sure, thank you. Uh, I am making my book free as a PDF
Hmm.
on my website, at rodneymiles.com. I also offer bundles there, so you can get a bundle deal. And if you're an author, if you're someone who wants to be a full-time author, either this year or in the next 10 years, I'm launching a community for people who want to become full-time authors, where a limited number of us will do this together. That's being launched in the first quarter of 2025. But my website will always be the staple way to get in touch if you'd like and see what's offered at rodneymiles.com.
Amazing. So rodneymiles.com, that'll be on the show notes, that'll be on the screen for those watching when this in fact, as long as you're watching this episode. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. It's nice meeting you finally, Peter.
Thank you. And for the listeners, I hope you learned something. So you can combine this episode and episode 95 on self-publishing and succeed in writing that book in you. I know a lot of us have books that we've refused to bring out. So till next week, when we are back with a brand new episode, don't forget to keep taking your business, and bye for now.